And with that in mind, there's no more appropriate expert to open our conference this morning than Professor Hijdron Stuger, one of the leading international experts in this field. Some of you may remember that Professor Stuger was scheduled to deliver her keynote address here at last year's conference. In fact, she'd already arrived in Israel when the war with Iran unfortunately broke out. As events unfolded, the conference had to be cancelled, and like many international visitors at the time, she found herself unexpectedly stranded in Israel for several days before she was able to return home safely. Given that experience, it would have been entirely understandable that had she decided not to come back, we would have understood. However, instead, when we invited her this year, she immediately agreed. That said, as everybody knows, the reality here continues to be extremely uncertain, making it difficult for all of us to know what's going to happen this morning, this afternoon, tonight and tomorrow. And for that reason, we ultimately decided over the past few weeks that the most responsible way to have Hijdron participate this time was to have her hold her keynote online. That said, we're deeply grateful for her willingness to join us. Her friendship and support for our work mean a great deal. Professor Hijdron Stuger is a full professor and chair of the School of Research, Development and Evaluation at the University of Regensburg and holds an honorary professorship at the Pontificia Universidad Católica del Peru. She has served as Vice President of the International Research Association for Talent Development and Excellence and as Editor-in-Chief of High Ability Studies. Her research focuses on talent development in STEM, learning and instruction, and especially mentoring. She regularly advises governments and foundations across Europe, the Americas, Asia, and the Gulf on designing research-based educational services, and she currently leads 6 large-scale grant-funded projects, several of which centre on mentoring. It's an exceptional privilege to have Professor Stuger share her work with us firsthand, so without any further ado, I welcome Professor Hijdron Stuger to deliver her address. All right, so one more note, as she referred to, there will be time for questions and answers, comments at the end. In order to make the comments, you'll have to come up to the stage, speak to the microphone, and then Hijdron will be able to respond.
So thank you very much for the nice introduction, and I'm really sorry I can't be with you in person. I really tried hard last time and also this time. We only decided on very short notice that I will give my presentation online today, but I hope I will see all of you and my friends who helped me a lot last year, and it was frightening, but I still loved my time with you very soon again. So I share my presentation now. Unfortunately, I will not be able to see you. Normally I like to see people when I talk to know if there are questions or what they find especially interesting, but hopefully afterwards we will have the chance to discuss and I will respond to your questions. So I will share my screen now so you can see my slides. Can you see it? I can't see if you see it, but I hope it's working. So today I will talk about the mentoring paradox and how to overcome it, although that's a little bit too big a title, because probably in 45 minutes I can't really go into too much detail how to overcome the mentoring paradox, but at least I hope I can give you some ideas from what we learned over the last 25 years in our research on mentoring programs on different stages of talent development. And to make sure we're all knowing what I talk about, I brought a definition for you. Normally we mean with mentoring a relatively stable relationship over time between an experienced mentor and their less experienced mentee. It is characterized by mutual trust and goodwill, and its goal is to support the mentee's learning, development, and progress. So you see that's a prototypical definition. Very often people talk about one-on-one mentoring when they talk about mentoring. Of course, there are also different formats like group mentoring. For example, one mentee can have several mentors, which is not very common, but it happens. Or one mentor has several mentees. There are also hybrid formats where we have a one-on-one relation, but there's a different diet, so pairs of mentors and mentees come together and work together. And then, of course, the mentors also can differ very much. So there can be peer mentoring. It's not necessarily always a very much more experienced person. It can also be a peer. We have expert mentoring. We can also train teachers to become mentors. So the mentors also can vary very much, and I will go into a little bit more detail soon. We also have different kinds of delivery mode. There's online mentoring, offline mentoring, and hybrid formats. And there are many different contexts for mentoring. So probably the most interesting for you is academic mentoring that takes place at schools, universities, with high school students, graduate students, young scientists. But there's also a whole body of research about workplace mentoring or youth mentoring, for example, with delinquent students or children and young people, or mentoring to avoid drug abuse. So there are many, many areas in mentoring. Of course, today we will focus on talent mentoring, and here often the goal is to increase performances, but there are also other goals like emotional well-being, leadership development, and so on. So just to give you a little idea that it's a very broad field, and as already mentioned, today we will focus on talent development, gifted education, and mentoring. And what's really interesting is we look into biographic case studies or interview-based research with eminent people. We nearly always find that they had mentors, mostly several mentors, during their talent development. One of the most famous publications is by Benjamin Bloom, who did interviews with 120 eminent people from different domains, and what he found is that they had different kinds of mentors that took different kinds of mentoring roles. I will go into a little bit more detail later over the development of talent in the lives of these people. So mentoring seems to be very important when it comes to becoming eminent in a field. These findings contribute to the perception that mentoring could be the gold standard of education. And there's also more work also in the field of schools, for example, that hint into that direction. So probably most of you will be familiar with the 2 sigma problem, also by Benjamin Bloom. What he found was then in constellations like one-on-one mentoring or one-on-one tutoring, it is possible to reach achievements that are 2 standard deviations higher than in regular classroom instruction, but also much higher than if you use real good kinds of differentiation or mastery learning in classrooms. So taken together, these findings and many more, there are also meta-analyses, for example, that show that mentoring is much more effective and shows higher effect sizes than other measures of gifted education like pull-out programs, acceleration, special gifted classes. So all these findings together really could maybe show us that mentoring is the gold standard of education. And that's also why I would say maybe 30, 40 years ago, literally thousands of formal mentoring programs came into life in different contexts: academic mentoring, workplace mentoring, youth mentoring, and aiming at different outcomes. So that's in a way a nice thing. What sometimes is forgotten, the studies by Bloom and other people show normally or go into informal mentoring. So we only find eminent people and we realize, okay, they had great mentors, but very rarely they have formalized mentoring programs. So it's a very different thing if we want to create a formalized mentoring program, because there the results are not as good as we would wish, and that's also why in the meantime we have the term mentoring paradox. Why mentoring paradox? On the one hand side, we have all these great results from biographical studies, but also from quantitative studies in schools, universities, or companies, that mentoring can be very, very effective, more effective than any other measure. However, if we look at the broad number of mentoring programs worldwide, we find that the results are not as good as they could be. So in the meantime, we have meta-analysis. For all of you who are not aware what meta-analysis are, meta-analysis collect all empirical studies that exist on a field, and they look at the effect sizes. So, and what we find in really many different meta-analysis is that the effect sizes, so the effectiveness of mentoring programs on average are only small or moderate. And what's even more shocking, in some occasions we even find negative effects. So for example, anxiety increases or other negative effects. So you can imagine I'm doing research for 20 years now in the field of mentoring. It was very interesting for me to look deeper into the research and also do our own programs and find out why the effects can be very high, but can also be much lower or even negative. And what I want to do today, because I know you have great programs in Israel, I talked to some of you, and it's really outstanding programs, and I think it's really very special that a country focuses so much on mentoring. So what I try to do today, and I hope you can maybe find some aspects that are interesting for you, I will talk about the reasons for the mentoring paradox. I cannot go into a lot of detail, but I hope I can give you some ideas, and we have time to discuss it later on. So one big problem, Christensen did research on that, seems to be that many formal mentoring programs are using friendship approaches. So they just bring together a mentor and a mentee and more or less let them do whatever they decide to do. They maybe talk about what could be a goal, but they are not really doing goal-oriented mentoring. What do I mean by goal-oriented mentoring? That means mentors and mentees would decide together what goals they want to reach after a certain amount of time, and they would also break the goals down into midterm and short-term goals. They would think about approaches to reach the goals, and they would plan milestones. And what we know from the research is a lot of programs, and that's really thousands and thousands of programs the researchers looked at, a lot of programs don't really do goal-oriented approaches or just define goals but don't really decline how to reach the midterm, short-term goals. Another area where there can be done improvement is program design. So first of all, and I will go into a little bit more detail soon, the whole conceptualization differs very much depending on what goal the mentoring program wants to reach. So I would do a completely different program in the early stages of talent development than in later stages of talent development. And then, of course, what also is very important is the appropriate duration. Meta-analysis show that normally we only can find really good effects if mentoring programs take at least a year. But the duration is not enough. It's also very important that we have regular exchange between mentor and mentee, ideally on a weekly basis. It can even be short inputs or emails, but it should be very regular. Then it's also important to create suitable learning platforms and learning environments. I will talk a little bit more about that later on, but just to give you an example, for example, if we want to get girls interested in the field of STEM, we know it's not very helpful to do it in a very competitive way. They more appreciate the cooperation, especially if they're in mixed programs, or if we have younger mentees, they need much more structure than older mentees. So these things really vary between the groups of mentees. And of course, it's also very important to use appropriate matching algorithms, or if you do it by hand, to use appropriate matching. So for example, again, to come back to girls in STEM, we know for them it's really important to have female mentors who are successful in the field of STEM. For boys or in other areas outside of STEM, it's not so important, the gender. So there's also a lot of research only about matching. So here are a lot of fields we could work on in different mentoring programs. Another big area is training and support. So first of all, what we find if there's no training for mentors and mentees or no appropriate training, then programs normally aren't very effective. And there's also a whole branch of research in the meantime about mentoring support. So we often forget how important it is to support mentors and mentees. So for example, Tom Keller at the University of Portland is doing a lot of research only about that topic, the support of mentoring programs. And for example, regular check-ins by project teams are very important, or that mentoring diets have somebody to discuss their problems or their next steps with. And when we come into the field of training, there's also a lot of knowledge and research. So for example, the training content, Delta did some studies on that, and what they found is that it's very important to combine program-related content. So for example, what are the goals of the mentoring program? How can I reach the goals? What are the approaches or the measures that are used in the program? But then, of course, also content-related training. And that's normally the area where the mentors are the best persons to work with the people who are doing the training, because if you're doing a STEM program, then often the people who are doing trainings on program-related or mentoring-related content can't go too deep into content. So it's very good to have cooperations between the people who do trainings for mentees and mentors. But generally, mentoring training is very important. And here again, it's also a whole field of research what kind of formats are very effective or most effective. In the beginning, very often programs used training programs before the mentoring started, and that's important. However, what we know, it's very important to do ongoing training also during the mentoring, and it depends a little bit on the mentoring program, how long the units should be, if they should be online or offline. But there's also a whole body of research that shows that, especially in the context of online mentoring, that micro units are very effective. So really just short tips for every mentoring session. It can also be done offline, but of course that's much more difficult. Another huge area is summative and formative evaluation as the basis for program adaptation. So that's something that often can't be done in practice because practitioners have a lot of work with their programs. But still, if we think about how much time, effort, and love goes into mentoring programs and how much money also goes into mentoring programs, first of all, it's of course important to know if programs are effective. So that would be the goal of summative evaluation. Here we would try to find out, are our programs effective or not? And then formative evaluation comes into play, and that's in my view even more important, because in formative evaluation we try to find out what works well, what doesn't work so well, and how can we improve our programs or adapt our programs to make them work better. And coming back to the mentoring paradox, what we find is that especially summative evaluations often aren't done in a sound scientific way. And I want to give you some examples or show you why, and also give you an example from our own research in some minutes. So what's very often done, at least in Germany and in the US, I don't know the research or the work you're doing so much, I know some of the programs. What's often done is that after the programs, participants are asked how much they like the program, what they especially like about the program, and so on. And that's of course important, and it's very nice for somebody who invests a lot of work and love into a program. And it can also tell you something, how to improve the program. However, it's not enough. So as a researcher, I would say a minimum of evaluation standard, or a minimum standard for evaluation would be to really look how mentees develop over time. So we would need measures before the mentoring starts. So let's say our goal is to increase girls' interest in STEM. Then I at least would want to see that girls had a lower level of interest before they started the mentoring, that their interest increased during the mentoring, and that they have higher interest after the mentoring program or achievement, whatever your dependent variable is. So you see my y-axis is not very clear. I hope you forgive me, all of you who are mathematicians. And again, here I would say it's not enough to just look at development. If we invest a lot of money, effort into a program, at least we would want a program to be better than any other kind of education. So what we normally would look at from a scientific point of view, and I don't say the practitioners have to do it, but for governments to find out if programs are effective or foundations, it would be important to really see, are they more effective than any other support students, random sample control group students would get. And again, I would say that's not enough, because I guess a lot of you who work with talented young students will know they're very different than other students. And you can see before the mentoring, I already have the lines a little bit lower, because normally they are very different. The participants in programs we run are normally very different. So even if they develop well, we don't know, is it because of our mentoring program, is it because the parents support them a lot, is it because they are going to other schools, and so on. So to really make sure the programs are effective, we would need something like random basis control groups. So for example, we would need students who apply for the same program, are chosen for the same program, and are randomly assigned either to a participation group or to a random basis control group. And then if we find out that these students don't develop as well as the students who are very comparable to them, but participate in a mentoring program, then we would say the mentoring program is really effective. So that's the standards we are trying to hold on to in our own programs. And that's of course nice if the ministry invests a lot of money to see that it works like that. But I will tell you in a minute that it's not only about effectiveness, it's also about learning what you can learn from what works well and what doesn't work so well. I will go into some formative evaluation in a minute. So I want to use for that our own program, Manager. It's a program that we run for 20 years in Germany. So the ministry started the program because we have a big problem in Germany. We have very few women and girls who go into the field of STEM, so science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, you know that. And that already starts in schools, in school tracks for STEM, but also later on in professions and university studies. So 20 years ago, the ministry started a big program, and we conceptualized the program for Germany. So what we do, we take in 800 female mentees every year. Mentees are girls between 12 and 19 years old, so it's secondary school education in Germany, and many of them come from high achiever track schools in Germany. And every mentee gets a female STEM expert as mentor. So the women work either in academia or in companies in the field of STEM. All of them volunteer their time, and all of them week on a week mentor an individual mentee. And the nice thing after more than 20 years is we have a lot of data. We have by now 12,000 diets, and I will show you some results, especially what we learned, how to improve the program as well, but that comes in a minute. So just to give you an idea so you can better understand the formative evaluation aspects, I will go into in a minute. What we do in the program, we have a one-on-one mentoring for every girl. And every girl gets a female mentor. As I said, it's very important for girls to be in an environment where there are mainly females, especially in the early stages when it's about getting them interested into the field. We have a tailor-made platform, so it's programmed by our team, and they use email chat, video chat, forums, and many other things to communicate. So for communication, they use that. We also have other offerings that we will go into later. What's also important, and we know that from Das Gupta's research, that especially for girls in STEM, it's not enough to have one-on-one mentoring. It's also very important to have networking opportunities. So what we have on our platform, 800 girls and 800 mentors can network with each other on the platform. This way we have status higher role models, mainly mentors, and we have peers as role models as well. So we have different kinds of role models, and they can talk together about STEM, what they like about STEM, and they can also talk about STEM professions. And we have different kind of collaborations. For example, we have project phases, and they work together on different kinds of projects. The program duration, I just talked about some of the key issues of effective mentoring. So they sign up for at least 1 year, and they also commit to at least communicate with each other for 30 minutes, mentor and mentee. Of course, they can use the platform as long and as often as they want. And now coming back to our summative evaluation question. So here, for us, it was really important to have that waitlist control group. Just to give an example why it was so important. In Germany, girls normally have much lower interest in STEM, they have much lower self-concept, they have about the same grades as boys, but the girls who sign up in our programs have much higher interest even than boys. They have much higher self-concept even than boys in Germany, and they have much better grades. So you can see, if you just compare with the random sample control group, we don't learn if our program is working. Another thing that might be interesting for you, to find 800 mentees every year. I like to ask that question, what do you think, how many girls do we have to talk to? So we go to schools all over Germany. How many girls do we have to talk to find 800 who want to participate in the program? So I can't hear you or see you, but it's 75,000 girls you have to talk to find 800. So you can imagine a waitlist control group is absolutely essential to really find out if it's our program or if it's just a special kind of group that goes into programs like ours and that would develop well anyway. And of course it's also important to use validated measures, so we use reliable scales that are validated, and we look at different things like STEM activities, certainty about future career choices, elective intentions, or confidence in STEM. And I don't want to go into details of the results. If you're interested, we have some publications about that. What we really find is that the girls differ from the random control group and from the waitlist control group. In some cases we find an increase, in many cases we have ceiling effects, so we don't find increases, but we find that the waitlist control group decreases. So we have good effects here, and still I would say I wouldn't be happy with these results. It's a great result if you have it, and it's not easy, I can tell you. It took us several years to find these results, but still I would say it's 1 year, and I'm not sure if it doesn't just wear off after 2 years, 3 years, and so on. So what was very important for us in the summative evaluation to also look at if the program effects are sustainable. And after 20 years, you can imagine you have the chance to do longitudinal studies and really follow up later on. And what we found here is that 62% of our mentees later really choose STEM degrees or STEM professions, which is twice as high as in the age cohort. So we matched the age cohort statistically. And what's even more important, it's half of the 44% compared to 44% of a propensity score-based comparison group. So that means a group that applied for the program didn't participate after a year or so they were allowed in, and of course they're a little different still, so that's why we use propensity score weighting. So if somebody's interested in that, we can go into more detail later. So you can see that's in a way a nice result, and it's nice to present results like that after 20 years. However, what's much more interesting than summative evaluation, if it works or doesn't work, is formative evaluation. And that's why I really like the research in the field of mentoring, because here it's more about to find out under what condition is mentoring effective and how can it be improved. And now I only showed you some nice data. What I didn't show you, because I don't have so much time and I didn't want to go too deep into statistics, what we also of course find is substantial variability in the growth trajectories. That means some girls really have a very steep growth curve, other girls don't have that. And what's very interesting for us is to find out under what conditions do they develop especially well. And for that, we look at moderating and mediating factors. So we use questionnaires as well, but in an online mentoring program like Cyber Mentor, the great thing is we can also look at platform communication data. And although it's online, I think we can also learn something for offline programs from the findings we have here. So for example, what we looked at are the platform activities, so the log files, how often do they log in, what do they look at in the platform, and so on. We have huge amounts of words on the platform, so we have STEM communication data. We can find out how much they write on the platform and whether they talk about STEM or not. So for that we use quantitative text analysis and dictionary-based studies. So it's a quantitative approach. We don't read it, we just tag all the STEM words based on a dictionary analysis. And then we also can look at the context. So do they only talk to their mentors, or do they also talk to other participants on the participants on the platform. I hope my English is okay for you. And we also do different kinds of network analysis. So for example, we will look at the size of the network, how central the mentee's position is in the network, and so on. And all that gives us some ideas what's especially important to make mentoring effective. And we have a lot of results. I just want to show you some because I think that also might be interesting for your own programs. And even if they are not STEM related, we have similar findings for other fields as well. So, for example, what we find is even if they are very active on the platform but don't talk about STEM related topics, their growth curves aren't as steep. And we also find that networking is, I would say, even as important as mentoring for the mentoring success, because what we find in different studies, also longitudinal network studies, is that the mentee's size of the network, but also the mentee's centrality in the network on the platform. So the more people they connect with on the platform and the more they talk about them with these network partners, the steeper their growth curve is, or the better their development. And these are now not online platform data, but questionnaire data. Here we find that also the relationship quality with the mentor is very important. We find that, but also many other studies find that. What was especially interesting for us was that the relationship is not directly affecting the success. It's mediated by the educational capital that increases because of the mentoring. For example, we found that mentors help students to really also find friends outside of the mentoring programs or other people to talk about STEM, because often the girls told us or told the mentees that nobody finds STEM interesting in their environment, their families, friends, and so on. They help them to get a better infrastructure. They connected them with professors at the university or out of school STEM offerings and so on. So, as Shira writes, like 10 minutes. So the formative evaluation shows us what works well, and I also want to share some pitfalls with you, because it doesn't work immediately, and I think that's a very important thing. So, for example, we started out with one-on-one mentoring, and we thought, from all we knew from research, that should work well, but what we found was that in the beginning they used the platform very effectively and very often, but we had a big drop in communication. And we also found that, also we know networking is important, very few of our students use networking opportunities on the platform. So what we did, we swapped and we changed to a group mentoring format. And good news is, here you see the green line, the drop in communication wasn't as steep. And here on the right-hand side you see the networking increase, which was nice. However, bad news, the STEM-related communication decreased. They talked about pop stars and many other things, but not about STEM. We also found out that the relationship quality with the mentor decreased. So the group mentoring didn't work at all. You see, we only had 1 year of group mentoring because it was a disaster. That made us change the format again. So what we now do, and we still do it, we have some other changes, but I don't want to go into detail here. We now use a hybrid format. So we have mentoring diets, one mentor, one mentee, and we bring them together into a mentoring community of 4 people. This way it's more people to discuss with. So for example, if the mentor has to travel or is on holidays, then another person is there. but we also have a clear responsibility, because before we had a responsibility with diffusion for the mentors. And we also introduced STEM phases, so they are now doing different project phases. They start with discussing topics, and they do disciplinary mentoring projects, and then interdisciplinary mentoring projects. And that's more or less the best version we could get, and that's why we still do it like that. And maybe I help some of you not to do the same mistakes, and hopefully I also was able, so there's a publication if you're interested in more details, and hopefully was also able to show you that evaluation is not just a lot of work, but can also help to adapt programs and make them more effective. And here you can stop me if I'm too long. I would go into the last aspect. It's the alignment of stage of talent support, because it's also not the same kind of mentoring that works in or on every stage of talent development. So what we do normally, we use a model that's very much based on Bloom's model on stages of talent development. We know that we need different mentors and different mentoring roles depending on the stage of talent development. So I cannot go into detail because I don't have a lot of time, but maybe just to give you an idea. The very early stage of talent development is very often about interest development. It's not about excellence or expertise, it's really about getting people to fall in love with the talent domain. And here we know parents, teachers, or in the case of Cybermen for female STEM professionals are very important. And their mentoring roles mainly involve being a role model to show their own enthusiasm, to facilitate learning opportunities, so that's two mentoring roles. And for STEM, for example, we know hands-on projects are very important. So mentors on that stage of talent development are very often role models and facilitators of learning opportunities. And on the second stage, where it's really about expertise, of course, it already starts during school or university, but you know from expertise research, it's at least 10,000 of hours of deliberate practice. Here we have different kinds of mentors. And we start with teachers, professors at universities, then later on colleagues or domain experts. And you can imagine their roles are much broader. In the beginning, they are facilitators of learning processes. Later on, they are just contacts for questions. Or they help to socialize individuals into the talent domain. They're also social-emotional supporters, because at that stage, it's a very tough learning process normally. There's a lot of obstacles and failures, so it's also important to support the students here. And here we really talk from K-12 to later outstanding scientists. So you can imagine it's different kinds of mentors and different mentoring roles, and the programs vary very much. And the last stage is about eminence and innovation, and very few people reach that stage, of course. So here we really would talk about later Nobel Prize winners. Here it's about finding your own style and really innovating a field or a talent domain. And for that stage of talent development, the mentors differ very much. We have now distinguished experts, we have people who are innovators themselves, and in many cases, mentors pick their mentees now. It's not that we look for mentors in a formalized program, but very often it's an informal way of mentoring where outstanding people choose mentees. And again, the role of the mentor changes very much. It's not about teaching or being there for questions. Of course, they also can ask questions, But now mentors really become intellectual sparring partners. They become connectors with gatekeepers, funders, and so on. They also can help to sell your ideas, because even if somebody has a great innovation, the society often doesn't value it very much. Mentors become door openers to relevant people and funds. So you see, depending on the stage of talent development, we have to create very, very different programs. And what we do in our research group, we try to conceptualize programs that are very different depending on the stage of talent development. I already introduced Cyber Mentor to you. That's starting at the first stage, but goes into the second stage. It's also about skill acquisition, of course. And I also want to quickly introduce global talent mentoring to you. That starts on stage 2 and has the goal to go into style formation and to give you an idea that it's very, very different to Cyber Mentor when it comes to conceptualization, but many other things. I will show you a short video.
All over the world, also in remote regions, there are outstanding and highly motivated young talents in STEM, which stands for science, technology, engineering, mathematics, and medical sciences. Pressing questions about the future of our planet leave no doubt. It is important to help these young talents to develop into the STEM experts of tomorrow. And scientific findings are clear. One way to achieve this is through long-term mentoring. To make this happen, Global Talent Mentoring works with renowned partners from all over the world to find outstanding students as mentees and inspiring experts as mentors. Mentees and mentors are matched according to the mentee's STEM interests and the mentor's expertise. They work together in mentor-mentee dyads for up to a decade. With its members-only platform, Global Talent Mentoring makes long-term mentoring possible by overcoming barriers of geography and time. The platform provides online tools and a wide range of communication channels. The participants use the tools to work together on STEM topics and projects and to define their own learning pathways. The mentoring platform also allows participants to network with other like-minded mentees and mentors from all over the world, inspiring one another and growing together. Over 4 years, a team of researchers at the University of Regensburg in Germany developed the program according to scientific findings on mentoring and talent development. The program will be continuously evaluated and improved. Thanks to the program owner, the UNESCO-recognized Hamdan Foundation, and outstanding STEM experts from dozens of countries who are volunteering as mentors, participation is free of charge for all mentees. Mentoring is not everything, but it can make all the difference. Learn more about Global Talent Mentoring at globaltalentmentoring.org.
So I hope you got an idea that the programs are very different and that the conceptualization, for example, for Cyber Mentor was much easier for us because we had much more knowledge from research than the conceptualization for Global Talent Mentoring, where we did a lot of interviews with outstanding experts. And I want to finish my presentation just to give you an idea if you're in the process of conceptualizing new mentoring programs, that depending on the goals, the programs are very different. So for example, in the Cyber Mentor, we want to get girls interested in STEM. So it's stage 1 of talent development. In Global Talent Mentoring, we want to develop expertise and eminence in a STEM domain. So the duration, first of all, is different. For Cyber Mentor, it's a year. for global talent mentoring, mentees sign up for already 10 years, and they're already very committed that they want to have a STEM profession and career. The mentees differ very much. In Cyber Mentor, it's girls, grades 5 to 13. In global talent mentoring, it's exceptionally talented students worldwide around the age of 16. I say around the age of 16 because it really depends on their competency level. For example, we included a student from Hong Kong who was only 12 and had already finished his bachelor's degree in physics. For mentors, for the first stage of mentoring, it's very, very important for Cyber Mentor, and the first stage, it's very important to have female role models because we want to motivate girls. For global talent mentoring, it's not so important if it's male or female mentors. Here it's very important we have renowned STEM experts, mainly researchers. And also the selection process differs very much. So in Cyber Mentor, everybody who wants can participate, so it's very low threshold. In global talent mentoring, we have a very competitive application process. The country nominates their most outstanding students, and then they do a very long application process on the platform as well. I don't want to go into detail, just to give you an idea. And of course, the program features differ very much. So in Cyber Mentor, it's very structured. We have the project phases. They know exactly what to do. Whereas in global talent mentoring, it's very self-paced, and it's more about real-life collaborations, working on a manuscript together, on a research project together. The mentees are craving for knowledge, so they really kind of would love to talk to the mentors every day, although the mentors as well commit only for half an hour. So it's very different. In Cyber Mentor, we have to motivate the girls to keep on track. In global talent mentoring, it's more self-paced. So just to give you an idea that the stage of talent development really has an influence how to conceptualize a program, and I hope I at least gave you some ideas. It's very difficult if I don't know the individual programs, but we have time for questions, and if you want to go deeper into some of the research findings, you find most of them on my ResearchGate page. They are normally all available there. And thank you very much, Shira, for giving me 2 extra minutes.
Thank you. I hope you can hear the cheers here. Thank you, Hadrian, very much. We will now get to the question session. So if anyone has any questions, please come here and talk to the microphone. Watch the camera.
Thank you very much. It was an excellent presentation. I learned a lot. I have a question. Do you have any insight to the impact of face-to-face mentoring versus online? Because Israel is a much smaller country, and Egypt is a much better one-on-one. It's easier for us to have the mentor sit physically with the mentee.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's really depending very much what kind of mentoring you're doing. So the online format has advantages because it's very flexible in time. So for example, in Cyber Mentor, we really decided on an online mentoring program because we knew the most effective mentors are female mentors who work in the field of STEM. And we have very few women in the field of STEM. To find some close to the mentee's home and to make it possible to meet at a time when the mentor doesn't work because they're doing it voluntarily in the evening or in the weekend, it wouldn't work face to face. And we also did some research because some of the mentees met their mentors offline, so they had also face-to-face meetings, and interestingly we found that in some cases even had negative effects. So that was very interesting, probably because they didn't use the networking opportunities so much. For other areas like in STEM, for example, we also know it's very important to have these hands-on experiences, and that can't be done online. So what we try to do if we can't do face-to-face mentoring, but want to integrate things like project work, hands-on programs, then we normally try to combine online mentoring with face-to-face mentoring. But I would say it's really, I know it's not satisfying my answer probably. Maybe you want to talk about the kind of mentoring program you do, but I would really say it really depends on the kind of program, on the domain you're working in, and on the age of the students and on the kind of the mentors. If you can't do face-to-face mentoring, I would try to do at least a hybrid version if you think it's very important with hands-on projects. So just to give an example, Cyber Mentor, since 2018, we are now closely working with schools. So the mentors are also meeting the teachers online every 3 months, and then they plan projects together, and the schools give the laboratories and all the equipment, and the mentors give ideas and help the mentees with the project work online. So that works very well for us, for example. So that is a kind of combination. And we have another program where we train teachers as mentors, and we also have online mentors, so that can work as well. But it's of course much more work. Did that answer your question, or I'm happy to go? Yeah? Okay, I think I saw something. And it's so nice to see all of you, I know. Hi, Rachel. Sorry. So do we have any other questions?
Yes, coming.
Hi, first, thank you for an inspiring lecture. My question relates to age and the talent development stage. Assuming that I have limited funds and my goal is to actually keep women in the STEM industry, and I would also say after they have the first or even second child. Do you see an ongoing effect with your girls program, or would it be more effective to have a mentoring program after or during the first degree in STEM?
Mm-hmm. I mean, especially talking about girls or women in STEM, what we know from research is that in the beginning they are interested in STEM. In kindergarten, primary school, they're still interested. The interest goes down around adolescence. So that's the time when you have to get them. That's why we start with Cyber Mentor in secondary school. So, and in that age, it's also very important to have females as mentors and to have a mono-educative program. However, as soon as they are interested in the field of STEM, it's normally not so important anymore that they have just a female surrounding. So the older they get, the more relevant the same gender matching becomes. And what we know from, so that wasn't the original goal from Cyber Mentor, but a lot of our goals, the girls stay for several years, so some of them stay for 6-7 years in the program and then become mentors themselves. So, and what we realize is that in many cases they also enjoy the mentoring role very much because the mentors are also networking very much and support each other very much. And it's a big topic. How can, especially in Germany, because we don't have very good daycare, so how can I handle family and my job? What is the best next step in my career? And what we also have now is that we identify girls who are really outstanding and we nominate them for global talent mentoring. And that, of course, especially in Israel, as far as I know, you have so many great programs. What you could do, you could really try to identify the best next program for the girls who are interested and develop well, to have another program that's more suited for their stage of talent development. Does that help? Yeah, okay.
We have time for one more question. Yeah, Abiv.
Well, thank you. That was very interesting. I wanted to ask, you talked about the advanced stages, that the mentors choose their mentees. So could you elaborate when it happens, and how do you have a pool of mentors? How does it work?
Mm-hmm. So that was more, you talked about the third stage, the innovating the field, right? Yeah. So what we know from these biographic studies is that in the beginning it's very often that the mentees try to find mentors, but if they're really well known, then they're often contacted by people who are interested in the field or in the domain. It's not generally like that, but it happens more often than in stages before. And within our program, in the Global Talent Mentoring Program, I don't run the program anymore. So we conceptualized it for 4 years, and we had a 3-year pilot in Regensburg, and now the foundation in Dubai is doing the program. So I don't have any data. I only have data for 3 years, and that's still the second stage of talent development. What might be interesting, so we conceptualized the program, the mentors only sign up for 1 year, the mentees sign up for 10 years. Because the mentees in that program are already so specialized in one field, so they're not just interested in physics. We really want them to be interested in one specific topic in quantum physics, for example. And the mentees really, when I talked to the mentees, they were saying, oh, I read that manuscript and I didn't understand that topic, and I read that manuscript and I didn't understand that. So they're craving for knowledge, but then of course, after 2-3 years, they are so much further in their learning, the same mentor won't work anymore. And what we realized during the first 3 years, that the mentors often help to find other mentors who are deeper into the knowledge field the mentee is developing into. So that, I think, would be the step in between, that the mentors help to find, because for us it's very difficult. I'm not familiar with quantum physics, so I can't find the best mentor, but a physics professor can find a better mentor. And then probably if they're in a network like that, I would guess even in a program like Global Talent Mentoring, the mentors would really realize, oh, they are outstanding talents and I want to work with them.
Thank you.
So Hegel, thank you very much for a very inspiring lecture. You were far away, but we felt your heart here with us, so thanks a lot. We will take a half an hour break now. We're very Hebrew. I'm going to talk Hebrew for a few sentences. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.